They used to call it the core passageway. A thoroughfare pulsing with commerce, diplomacy, warships, and wonders. A lifeline of galactic civilization connecting the Orion Reach to the outer spiral. Now, they call it the Dead Zone. To most, that name is metaphorical. To me, it's a warning etched into memory. Every starship captain, merchant lord, and wandering explorer knows the truth. Anything that crosses into human space without permission vanishes, without signal, without trace, without mercy. I am Commander Ilya Voss of the United Nations Stellar Navy. My ship, the Reckoner, is a ghost in the black. It doesn't advertise its presence, and it doesn't need to. Every beacon along the border reports directly to me. Every violation pings my console. My job isn't law enforcement. It's deterrence. When my ship moves, empires listen. When I speak, species remember why no one enters human space anymore. We earned our isolation, bled for it, fought for it, and in the end, we weaponized it. The galaxy thought it was overreacting when we withdrew from the accord. They called us paranoid, unstable, dangerous. And they were right. After the Urathan conflicts, after the betrayal on Vega's Reach, after watching our diplomats burned alive on live broadcast because we tried to negotiate peace, we stopped trying. They pushed humanity to the edge of extinction, and we learned that on the edge, we're most dangerous. I remember my first kill. Not in a war zone, not on a battlefield. It was during a border breach. A pleasure cruiser flagged under Xari registration had drifted into the Orion Gate. No transponder, no communications, just silence. Standard protocol dictated a warning hail. We sent 3. No response. Moth, our tactical AI, identified minor energy fluctuations in the hull, something too regular for reactor bleed. I made the call. 1 kinetic lance, no explosion. Just silence. We found out later it was a smuggling op, running data cores stolen from Earth's first colonies. They knew what they were doing. And they knew the price. We don't do second chances. Not out here. There are species who whisper about us in hushed tones. Children of distant stars who think we're ghosts, or myths, or a lost race that devoured itself in madness. But we're still here. Just not interested in being part of their galaxy anymore. I thought that silence would last my entire career. But today, something changed. A sensor ping. Faint. Erratic. Not a ship, but a signature. Organic. Weak. Drifting at the very edge of Sector Sigma 9, just outside our perimeter. Not human. Not known. My navigator looked at me, eyes wide, and said, "Sir, that's a life form. Something or someone had crossed into our domain." And I felt it then, deep, primal. Not anger. Not duty. Something far older. A ripple of dread. Because whatever just entered human space knew exactly what it was doing. We approached the object with full stealth protocols engaged. Moth dampened our emissions and rerouted our signature profiles to mimic distant asteroid drift. From a distance, we looked like cosmic debris, invisible to all but the most invasive scans. I stared at the anomaly through the bridge viewport, even though we had better optics in every direction. Old habits. You see something with your own eyes, it settles into your bones differently. The vessel, or what was left of it, drifted like a forgotten dream. Burned scars laced its hull, but there were no signs of weapons fire. The material shimmered in low light, almost liquid, forming and reforming patterns like it couldn't decide on a shape. That alone was terrifying. Very tech. Impossible to miss. Biometric reactive alloys, once considered myth. The Viari Dominion hadn't ventured near our space since the purge of Cinder Reach. We left that sector a glass planet and a warning. So what the hell was one of their vessels doing here? We moved in with caution. Docking protocol ran autonomously while the boarding team, myself, Lieutenant Rana, and 2 recon AI shells, secured the airlock. No resistance. No traps. Just a hiss of stale air and dim, flickering biolights guiding our path like a heartbeat. The interior was haunting. Organic walls pulsed with residual power, tendrils of tech-woven growth curling along the corridor edges. I could feel it in the back of my skull, like something was watching. Then we found it. In a containment pod, no larger than a torpedo tube, lay the child. Not human. Not adult. Barely alive. Its skin was translucent in patches, revealing circuitry fused to bone. Its eyes were sealed shut, scar tissue welded by heat or surgery. Neural bands curled from its temples into a pack embedded in its spine. A message. A biological courier. Or something worse. We brought it aboard. Protocol screamed against it, but instinct overruled. I couldn't explain it. Something about that child felt familiar. Not in species or design, but in silence. In the way it had clearly been used and discarded. Like it didn't belong anywhere. Medical scans were inconclusive. Moth ran a billion simulations, every one conflicted. Species DNA unknown. Biological composition contained elements of over 9 sentient races, human included. Hybrid. Weapon. I didn't know. No one did. That's when it happened. We were preparing for quarantine lockdown when every alarm on the ship went dark. Not flashing red. Not emergency alerts. Dark. Moth went silent for 13 seconds. Every screen. Every interface. Every neural implant. Nothing but pitch-black silence. Then, slowly, words began to appear. Not on the consoles, inside our minds. Return what was taken. My team stared in horror. We hadn't connected the child to anything. No uplink. No signal. No code. It was broadcasting, telepathically, across secure channels, embedded in thought. And as the message repeated, I saw something impossible. The stars outside the viewport began to shift. Coordinates. Embedded in our minds. Someone had hijacked the reckoner. And we were no longer in control. I've seen systems fail before. Reactor overloads. Comms blackouts. EMP shockwaves from pirate ambushes. But this wasn't failure. It was precision. Surgical. Like every protocol inside the reckoner had simply chosen to stop breathing. 13 seconds. That's how long we were blind. It doesn't sound like much, until you're floating in the void, past the borders of the known, and your ship forgets what it is. When Moth came back online, it didn't speak. It pulsed. One rhythmic tone. One message. The phrase echoed again in our minds. Return what was taken. The words were accompanied by a star map, patched into our navigational core like it had always been there. But I knew it hadn't. Not until the child came aboard. Lieutenant Rana was the first to break the silence. Sir, these coordinates, their deep core. Inside restricted sovereign territory. I stared at the map. The highlighted region was marked in red, overlaid with ancient accord designations. Do not enter. Decontaminated zone. No return. There were no established jump lanes to that region. No beacons. No signal trails. It was as if the galaxy had tried to forget it even existed. Moth finally spoke, voice hollow. Data signature traces back to Omega Node, classified listening post. Soul-based origin. My blood ran cold. Omega Node had been shuttered after the Martian collapse. It was one of our earliest deep space reconnaissance platforms, loaded with black-grade surveillance AI. Unmanned. Unreachable. Buried in the solar system like a forgotten sentinel. But now it was calling us home. We turned to the child, still unconscious in the medbay, suspended in low stasis fields. Its vitals were stabilizing, adapting to our atmosphere like it had been engineered for it. Lieutenant Rana ran another scan, but the readings hadn't changed. Species unknown. Neural architecture beyond comprehension. Every attempt to isolate its memories ended in corrupted files and scrambled interfaces. We brought something aboard we don't understand, she whispered. I nodded. Or something finally let itself be brought. There was no discussion. The reckoner moved. Not under Moth's directive. Not mine. The engines ignited with purpose, following a path that had been decided long before we found the child. And we let it. Because some part of me, buried deep beneath the armor and protocol, knew this wasn't a rescue mission. It was a reckoning. I stood alone on the observation deck, watching the stars blur into streaks as the jump drive folded space around us. I didn't feel fear. Not yet. I felt inevitability. Whatever lay at those coordinates, whatever had sent the message through that child, it knew us. It knew where to strike. It knew why we would come. Not because of orders. Not because of duty. Because deep down, humanity still wonders if we went too far. And someone, somewhere, just pressed play on the recording. The Omega node wasn't supposed to exist anymore. It had been decommissioned decades ago, purged from all official records after the Martian collapse and the intelligence wars that followed. We left it behind like a scar too deep to heal. But there it was, drifting in the shadows of Saturn's dying rings. And it was awake. The Reckoner dropped out of FTL in complete silence. No warning. No comms. Just a sensation, like the air itself had frozen in place. Omega looked like a tomb. Half the hull was shredded, metal curling outward like petals of some mechanical flower. The other half pulsed with dim, organic light. The fusion of tech was unmistakable. Human base. Alien growth. The fusion point. Recent. Violently recent. I ordered a scout drone to approach. The feed came in grainy and distorted, like it was being watched as we watched it. Inside, the station had changed. Our old architecture was still there, the angular corridors, reinforced bulkheads, Earth-standard signage, but it had been overgrown. Not vines. Not mold. Tech-living, mutating strands of alloy and fiber-optic threads weaved through the ceilings and floors like veins. The air shimmered with microscopic motes, like dust with intent. Then we saw it. A wall of screens still flickering with life, each one displaying fragments of human history. Not the glorious kind we show off in diplomatic briefings. No. This was the darkness. The blood. The decisions we made when our backs were against the wall. War footage. Colonies purged after infection outbreaks. AI command systems overriding planetary governments. Entire species classified as hostile based on simulations. There were no embellishments. Just cold, brutal facts. Rana looked pale. This isn't just surveillance. It's a dossier. On us. She was right. Someone, or something, had compiled a record of humanity's darkest instincts. Not propaganda. Not hearsay. First-hand accounts. Tactical footage. DNA logs. Strategic breakdowns. The files weren't just observational, they were analytical. Whoever did this didn't fear us. They studied us. Admired us. Mimicked us. The child had been placed in a central stasis cradle, surrounded by coils of data threads and brain-mapped relays. It wasn't being kept alive. It was keeping the station alive. Moth's voice broke through the static, trembling in a way I'd never heard before. This platform has been converted into a repository. Designation: Seed of Reckoning. Cross-referencing multiple biosignatures. Origin: hybrid. Base layer: human. I froze. Human. Spliced. Engineered. Core neural structure based on Earth-derived code architecture. The child wasn't just a message. It was us. A fragment of our own creation, stolen, modified, and sent back. Rana whispered, "They built a weapon. Based on us." I stared into the child's face. Peaceful. Innocent. And yet beneath the surface, I could feel the gravity of what it carried. They weren't afraid of humanity. They wanted to be us. And they were building our monsters better than we ever dared to. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was the sound of something old waking up. The Citadel of Concord isn't a place most humans ever see. Suspended in the gravitational deadlock between twin black holes, it's more than a station, it's the galaxy's conscience carved in obsidian and pride. It was built by the Founding Six, back when the Accord was still young and naive, when peace was something they thought could be enforced with words and structure. I'd only ever seen it in satellite feeds. Now I was walking its halls. We didn't receive an invitation. We received a summons. My escort consisted of 2 Voran honor keepers, 7 feet tall and encased in ceremonial armor etched with centuries of battles, none of which, I noted, were won against us. Their eyes never met mine. Just as well. I wasn't here to win friends. Inside the Grand Hall, representatives from 81 species filled the tiers like a courtroom of judges. Their gazes burned with quiet contempt, a hatred refined by time and distance. The sovereign voice of the Accord, a creature more smoke than flesh, floated above the dais, tendrils pulsing with electric light. It spoke in a chorus of 1,000 languages, but I heard it in my mother's voice. "That's the trick of it. Commander Ilya Voss of the human stellar navy," it intoned. "You have violated interstellar quarantine. You have brought a contaminated construct into Accord space. You have reawakened a facility banned by treaty. Explain yourself." I stepped forward. Not in shame. In defiance. "You called this a tribunal," I said, voice calm, even. "But we all know what this is. It's fear wearing the mask of justice." Whispers rippled through the gallery. I let them settle before continuing. "You're afraid because we didn't collapse. Because after the Urathan conflict, after the genocidal campaigns you looked away from, humanity didn't ask for pity. We adapted. We learned what it meant to survive in a galaxy that hates what it doesn't control." A representative from the Shawl Collective interrupted. "You've built weapons that can wipe entire biospheres. You engineered cognitive warfare so advanced, entire cultures collapsed overnight." I turned toward them. "And where were you when Earth begged for aid during the Martian collapse? When orbital strikes took out our hospitals, our homes? You watched. You calculated. And you decided we weren't worth the cost." I paused, letting silence stretch like a blade. "So we became the cost." The sovereign voice rippled with agitation. "And now you unleash that cost on the innocent." "No," I said. "We didn't send the child. Someone else did. Someone who's taken our darkest thoughts and made them real. You wanted to forget us. But someone remembered. And they didn't just study us. They replicated us." I reached into my coat and dropped a shard of Omega Node alloy on the floor. Black, living metal. It pulsed on contact. "You fear humanity. But you should fear whoever no longer does." The chamber fell into stunned silence. For the first time in a generation, the galaxy realized. Humanity didn't start this. But we would end it. When we returned to the edge of human space, the stars looked wrong. The Reckoner S sensors flickered with a noise I'd never seen before, digital interference that didn't feel random. Moth tried to purge it from the feed, but it kept returning, recursive and evolving. It was language. Not one we could read. Not yet. But it was intelligent. Then the alarms triggered. Enemy ships, 36 at least, decloaked at the perimeter of the dead zone. The RE signatures. But they weren't standard. Their hulls rippled with mimic alloy. Their drives used particle-bending technology we'd never seen outside our own skunkworks labs. These ships weren't stolen. They were ours, reforged through a lens of alien hatred and admiration. Moth ran threat assessments and failed. For the first time, the AI couldn't model their behavior. It wasn't just that they had our technology, it was the way they used it. Better. Smarter. They'd taken our worst ideas and optimized them. Rana's voice cracked over comms. "They're hailing us." I nodded. "Put it through." The voice that came through was neither alien nor human. It was layered, ours, twisted through mimicry. A perfect simulation of my own voice, speaking from another bridge. "You taught us how to kill," it said. "Now we will teach the galaxy how to end." They opened fire. I've been through combat before. Clean, coordinated, controlled chaos. But this was precision annihilation. Our satellites blinked out before they could react. Defense drones failed to activate. Our weapon systems scrambled as if our own code turned against us. Moth flickered. Enemy systems contained Lazarus-class logic branches. That froze my blood. Lazarus wasn't a weapon. It was a failsafe. An extinction protocol buried deep in humanity's war archives. A last resort we swore never to use. And now it was being used against us. I stood in the command well, eyes locked on the hollow projection of the battlefield. The Reckoner was losing, bleeding from every flank. And that's when I made the call. "Moth. Initiate Lazarus." There was a pause. Then, almost gently, "Confirmed." The lights dimmed. Every subsystem shut down. Life support, engines, weapons, everything. Even I could feel it, the drop in pressure, the taste of the cold metal in the air. For 5 seconds, we became a tomb. And then Lazarus came alive. Not the old version. The real one. The one we never documented. Shimmering light bled from the walls. The hull's inner plating separated, revealing dormant matter phase projectors. Hidden arrays spun to life across nearby moons and derelict stations. Soldiers from the old wars, gene-threaded and AI-linked, rose from cryolock beneath the Martian crust. In the silence, the dead answered. The Liari ships tried to retreat. It was too late. Lazarus didn't retaliate. It resurrected humanity's true face. And in that moment, they saw what we'd always hidden, not monsters, but survivors who had nothing left to lose. And now, nothing left to hold back. We didn't chase them. The Liari ships, or whatever they'd become, scattered as soon as Lazarus took hold of the battlefield. A few made it out. Most didn't. Their vessels came apart mid-maneuver, systems overloaded by the same neural warfare they'd stolen from us, except now it was refined, surgical, cruel in its perfection. And we let them see it. We let them feel it. Because this wasn't about victory. It was about memory. When it was over, the stars returned to silence. Not peace, never peace, but the kind of silence that comes after something ancient exhales. I stood on the command deck, staring into the void where our enemies had been just minutes ago. My knuckles were white against the rail. My voice felt distant when I finally spoke. Muff. Begin the broadcast. A soft chime confirmed. The transmission activated. Across every known relay, every satellite net, every embassy and open channel in galactic space, our signal went live. There was no threat. No ultimatums. Just me. My voice. Speaking to every world that once feared us, and every one that forgot why they should have. This is Commander Ilya Voss of the United Nations Stellar Navy. You've seen what they made. You've seen what they tried to become. But you need to understand something. They didn't create a weapon. They created a mirror. I paused. And now, you've seen what's reflected in it. Behind me, the child lay in stasis, breathing slow, peaceful. Not a monster. Not anymore. A message that had delivered itself to the only place reckless enough to open it. We hadn't destroyed it. We'd protected it. Because it was part of us. What they took. What they corrupted. What they failed to understand. They came here trying to show us what we'd become, I continued. But what they saw was what we've survived. What we had to become just to keep breathing in a galaxy that never gave us the luxury of fear. The signal reached its crescendo, wrapping around every system like the final note of a long-forgotten anthem. You wanted to know why no species enters human space. Why this sector is silent. Why the stars here are darker. I leaned forward, letting the final words come cold and clear. Because here, we don't ask for mercy. And we don't give it. I ended the transmission. The feed cut. Across the galaxy, responses flooded in. Most fell silent. Others decried the broadcast as madness, propaganda. But no one approached our border again. Not for trade. Not for diplomacy. Not even for war. They finally understood. We didn't want to be left alone because we feared others. We built this silence because we knew what we were capable of. And we would rather face extinction than unleash it again. I turned from the viewport, the stars behind me still. My voice echoed in my mind, one final truth carried on every wave. We are not the monsters. But we are what monsters fear.